When I was a young mother, I wish I knew I wasn't supposed to know it all. Yeah, and I kind of tear up thinking about that. Like, I really wish I, wasn't still part of that like hamster wheel of like, yeah, I learn new things and I do like what I know, but I still think I'm supposed to like know it all, and that I could give myself a sense of a process and compassion and mother myself in that way.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have my dear friend, Dr. Gertrude Lyons, with us on the show today. Gertrude spent nearly 30 years empowering others to create meaningful, successful lives. In her new book, Rewrite the Mother Code From Sacrifice to Stardust, she guides women to take charge of their own transformation. I'm excited to explore the myths of motherhood, the ways all women mother, and the ancient and modern mothering traditions practiced around the world. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now, let's go talk with Gertrude. Gertrude, welcome back to the show, returning champion. Here you are. Hi, girl.
Hi, Julie. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how thrilled and excited and blessed and so many things to have this opportunity with you again. Woo.
Well, and we were talking about when to have you on again, and we were looking at several months out because we're booked with guests that far out. And then this opened today within
Mhm.
less than 48 hours. And
Yeah,
so I got your email. You said, well, I think the angels opened it for us. I said, absolutely. Absolutely.
I really,
So
really
welcome
do.
back.
Thank
Y-
you.
You say all women mother. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, this was something I'm not going to say I stumbled upon, but it kind of feels that way in a way when I was doing my dissertation, and kind of along the way of doing my own work too, where I wanted to raise the awareness for women who were going to have children or thought they might want to have children to prepare for it. And something I said in the workshop and in the study was, well, I want you all to know, whether you decide to have children or not, we all mother, right? And their faces just went, what? Like I said, yeah, we all mother. We all conceive, create, give birth, yes to children, which is a pretty miraculous, beautiful thing that our physiology allows us to do. But we're designed, equipped to do all of that with dreams, ideas, careers, relationships, pets, anything that we put our caring, nurturing mother energy into, we mother. And then I don't want to forget to say this because sometimes, that's such a big point. But really, the big point on top of that big point is the most important person we need to mother is ourselves.
Yeah. And I want to do a deep dive into that here in a few minutes. But first, you say that motherhood's a portal. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, so many aspects of it, and if I take one aspect of it, I believe that, you know, this mothering space, but motherhood, if we want to look at it, the choice to have children and everything that that entails, um, opens us up to this vast experience. And it's there's a lot of myths around that we need to break because, in our current culture, it's like, well, you're having a baby, you're bringing a life into the world. Okay. Like that's pretty cool. Um, but it's a portal for your transformation. I believe when we can get to the bottom of it and do our work to be present in the whole human experience of motherhood, conception, birth, mothering a being, that it opens doors that are you everything, there's a lot of things like it, but there's something particularly about it, and the aspect I want to highlight around it is pain. And it's in my book, I talk about cosmic codes, and you're hitting on them, but the one like motherhood is a portal, but pain is a portal. And that, people are like, pain's that thing you should just numb and stop. And we want to make distinctions on pain. There's empowering pain, and then there's like I have a tooth cavity, and 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 those are distinct kinds of pain, but pain that is leading to creation and pain that has the opportunity for us to be in relationship with offers access to altered states, to aspects of ourself we didn't know we had, to just like thinking like, gosh darn it, like I am amazing. And that I can do this, and even with the pain that's involved with it.
I remember when I was in labor with Jonathan, my one and only time. Told this before, but I'm gonna tell it again. About I didn't have time for drugs because he came pretty fast. Blow my brains out pain was about 20 minutes. I remember in the middle of it, I said to my gynecologist, to my OB, who was a gal, I said, "Okay, I don't wanna do this anymore." And she started laughing, and she said, "Honey, the train has left the station. I mean, he's coming." And we didn't know, we didn't check to see what his sex was because that wasn't, not everybody did that back
No,
then,
it was
30 plus years ago, and we wanted to be surprised. But I remember once he was born, the pain was gone, and
yeah.
talk about productive pain. That's the thing that comes to mind is labor pain. And in the middle of it and leading up to it, I remember thinking, and I think all first-time mothers are thinking, "How in the heck are we gonna get this baby out of us and survive?" And then I kept telling myself, "Trillions, kabillions of women have done this and survived. You can too, Ryan," like get get your stuff together here. But I remember once he was out, there was no more pain. It was incredible. And then you touch on the pain of creating something, creating anything. Certainly creating your new book,
Yeah. I mean, that was
creating
not a, like,
yeah.
pain-free experience.
Exactly, creating a move, creating a relationship with a new person, whether it be a love interest or somebody else, and sometimes you go through some pain with
Yeah.
that, but hopefully in the end, it's all productive. So, I think that's a really interesting point that pain can be productive and it can be a portal to something new that we're manifesting,
Yeah.
and it doesn't mean that we always have to go through pain when we
No.
manifest things, but it's certainly part of the human experience.
Yeah, and to allow that to be there. We are in such a paradigm and culture right now that is so anti-pain, right? It's everything about making the pain go away, and there's it's just gotten overdone. Like, there's some beautiful ways, and I think sometimes we need that to, like, get to the other side of something so, we can really work on it. So, you know, but unfortunately, it's become something and so inundated in our culture that it ends up disempowering, because then you think, like, "I can't do it." I'm ha if I we're just assume we're not built for it, or, you know, it's become so the way, in our culture that we don't even think to question or know that there's a choice and what that choice can bring, right? It's like so dualistic. It's like avoid pain but don't talk about what the ramifications or consequences of the things that you put in place to avoid pain. And we're talking birth pain here, but we're numbing our pain all over the place, right? With addictions and whatnot, like our emotional pain, our, that kind of pain, um, that then it just kind of stops us from being able to navigate how to move through it, or what's some of the deeper healing that needs to go on. I think that's something that always, kind of breaks my heart a little bit is it it cuts you off from the potential of tapping into, like, deeper pa like, generational trauma, things that are living in your body and in your cells that is coming to the surface because of this current pain that you have the opportunity when you let it up to to heal, and that healing takes being with the pain, right? We can't just Right, like, jump over it. And
Well, and I think motherhood is a portal to a lot of things that don't involve pain, which
Yes.
are lots of joyful things and lots of creating things. And when we know what we don't want, it helps us create what we do want. So
Mhm.
I don't believe that motherhood is a portal to pain always. I believe that motherhood is a portal to life. It can be painful, but more often it's joyful, and we're moving from pain to joy, and the pain is most of the time temporary. Whether we're birthing a baby or whether we're creating a company or interviewing for a new job or getting a new car or establishing a new home or moving our kids to another school or going through an end of a relationship, perhaps with a spouse or a loved one, and death certainly is painful. And yet it gives us the opportunity, like you say, to move through it. Really interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way before.
No, and
You
I I just wanna underline that, Julie, because 'cause I'm so glad you said that because I was thinking about being on with you today and thinking about, some of the things we might be talking about, and something that just kept coming up was it's 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 the human experience,
Mhm,
right? Like, it's
exactly.
just the full human experience, like, let's not shut off any parts of it, right? And when we shut off one part, it might limit I kind of hold, and it's been my experience that if I'm shutting down my pain, I'm not gonna have quite the same access to the joy I could have, but when I accept that life is all of it, right? Like, life is the hurt, the sad, the pain, the pleasure, the joy, the wonder, the awe, like, they're all it's like the fabric of human existence, right? Like, and this is what it means to live a human life.
You touched on myths around motherhood. What are some of the unconscious myths around motherhood that you've uncovered?
Yeah, I think there's, um, like, somewhat in the book, and I'm not gonna, like, split hairs on this, there's myths and then there's codes, like, the wiring, right? I'll talk about them synonymously, because they all fall in the same bucket, things that we just, like, do because everyone else is doing, and that's how it's been done for some period of time, and it's wired in, right? Like, it's gotten encoded in us, and, one that I always put at the top is that, if you have a baby, if you have a spouse, anything that you're caring about takes precedence over your care. Especially happens, to us with children. And, this is generations of women who like that's, this is why you're on the planet and that's your sole purpose. And if that's your sole purpose, like get at it, and you don't really matter, but this offspring matters. And that's, become s- and anyone I say it to, they're like, "Oh, I know." But I still do it, and it's so hard not to, right? And there's so many messages that come at us, like, "That's selfish," or, you know, "Who do you think you are?" or "You're a diva." I mean, there's all these weird things that happen about, like, just good old self-care, right? And I do mean more than, when I say, like, women needing to mother themselves, I kind of assume maintenance, that you're taking care of your maintenance, you're getting showers, you're getting, fed, but sometimes, we don't even put ourselves we think like, "Oh my god, I took care of myself today and you know, I had 3 meals and or whatever, I ate nutritiously." It's like, "Oh," like, okay, we need to put ourselves first there, like, that should be a no-brainer, but then to look at like, okay, what does it then mean to take care of myself emotionally, spiritually, like continue to grow and learn and um, be with my emotions and feelings in a healthy way. And that's ongoing work, right? That I know as someone who was doing that so beautifully. And then by the time my second child came and I went into like my own state of overwhelm, it's like, nope, no more. I'm not going to do that anymore. Like it's all about the kids. Like I did this, right? So I'm not talking about this like, oh, somehow managed not to. It's such a draw and such a pull. But then the disservice that does then, Julie, is we're just continuing the pattern, we're not modeling, we're continuing a belief in ourselves like, "I don't deserve this," like, "I don't matter." Some really, um, damaging belief systems that get continuously embedded when we stick with that paradigm that just it doesn't work.
So are those beliefs in our DNA? Are they taught? Are they assumed? Are they just part of the zeitgeist of our culture throughout all of the generations? I'm thinking of two things while you've been talking about this topic. Number one, when you hear about the people in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries and before, a lot of women died in childbirth, and their husbands were remarried in no time flat because they needed a woman to come take care of the kids in the home and all of that. The other thing I think of is when we fly, if you're with a child, put your oxygen mask on first.
Right?
And so it's interesting. Is it cultural? Is it biological? What is it?
Well, I don't know that anybody has sat down to, like, totally, like, prove it's one of those,
Probably a
but
combo
from
platter.
it's a combo platter, there's gonna be some of all of that, but I think it's this is, if we can assume and know that, like, through a patriarchal, overly masculine, like, when we're overvaluing the masculine and women are just there to spit babies out, and not valued, and you do that for 6,000 years or so, it's you know, does it become part of our DNA? Like, scarily, it probably does, like, it's wired so deep, right? That's why we're so new to this concept, like, this is probably, not even
50 years
100
old.
50, right,
Yeah.
I mean, if you think 100 years ago, this it was like, no,
W
no, no, like, it
Women
was
couldn't vote 100 years ago.
exactly,
Yeah.
right? So, I like to give us this when I say, "Oh my gosh," when we say we don't know how to do it or, "Oh," we're kind of in shock, like, we want it, we know we have more value, we know that it's like we know instinctually that taking care of ourselves actually supports everybody and ripples down way more than not, we're not burnt out, we don't fall into the martyr poor me or, give up our own hopes and dreams because this is the only thing we're allowed to do. We're very new in this new environment and I think we're just starting to make our way.
I have quite a few clients who, once the kids were grown, they ended up getting a divorce,
Mhm.
and then they were forced to recreate their life, and some of them went on to create amazing lives, and others were just kinda lost in the shuffle and feeling like a victim and feeling like, I'm not gonna do that again. I'm not gonna be in another relationship, but they lost their whole sense of value because
Yeah.
it was all focused on the family and the kids. I talked to a man the other day who wanted to know why his wife divorced him after 30 years. And he was a contractor, and he was never home, and then he served on some city council boards and jazz like that,
Mm.
and so his wife's remarried, and we can talk to spirits whether they're attached to a body or not. So
Yeah.
he was really wound up about why did she leave me?
Mm.
And she said because she was so lonely And she was in her late 50s and she wanted to spend the rest of her life like that. She wanted to have a relationship of intimacy, not necessarily from a sexual
Yeah.
standpoint, that I'm sure was part of it, but more from a, I want to have a conversation with you. I want to be part of your life. I want you to be part of my life instead of just raising the kids and having dinner ready for you
Mhm.
and fixing your lunch. And he even said, the last year that we were married, she wouldn't even fix my lunch. And I wanted to say, well, go fix your own damn lunch, buddy. Why would she have to fix your lunch? But I didn't, but I thought it. And I thought, wow. So it was really interesting to
Mhm.
talk to his ex-wife's spirit, and she gave us a lot of information when we talked to her, and he said, "That's fair, that all makes sense." But
Yeah.
he said, "Why couldn't she tell me about it?" And I said,
Mhm.
"Well, perhaps she was afraid that she would lose her courage to
Yeah.
create a new life for herself." And then when you were scheduled to come on, I thought, "Oh, perfect
We
timing."
can talk about this.
Yeah, perfect timing for that.
Well, and, what comes up for me when I'll share even personally on this, Julie, is when, like, why didn't she tell me? And I think this was something that, like, why did I suddenly stop, like, learning and growing and pushing for more? Because our relationship, hit like kind of a maintenance zone, my husband and I, but I had been the one leading the way, pushing us to, like, you know, learn about ourselves, like, do premarital coaching, do coaching as a couple. And then there's something that I think that got triggered for me around fear, like, "Ooh, if I rock the boat, if I start asking for what I want or what I think is next in our relationship," like, before I was like, "Okay, like, he might leave me," or I was willing to risk it, but suddenly with children, little ones, like, I felt so vulnerable, and I wasn't even I it was only in looking back at this that I realized that so much of my turning myself off and, kinda just going into that mode was the vulnerability, and like I gotta, it's a false belief, right? That I didn't test it. I didn't, have the conversation like, hey, did you notice we've stopped like really, growing as a couple and I'm going to pick it back up. But I'm afraid you might, this might be when you leave, like tell my fears. Like it seems now like, why didn't I do that? But you're so in the grip of it and so in the like, nope, like just it's okay. Like I'll just keep going and, kind of survive almost.
Mhm. How have societal norms and popular media shaped our definitions in this day and age? And how different are they from, say, 40 years ago when we were growing up, 50 years ago when we were growing up, that kind of a thing? It seems to be that it's evolving, and you and I were the generation after the Gloria Steinems and the Bella Abzugs and all those guys who really paved the way for us from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
And then there were others, and it seems now sometimes women are really kinda caught in the middle because they don't really know how to balance the motherhood and the work life, because it seems like when women went to work, they did all the stuff at home with the family, and then they just added a job to it. And interestingly enough, I don't know if you experienced this, but a whole lot of my girlfriends, it used to be that the dads would die first, but in most instances, the moms died first of most of my girlfriends, including my
Oh.
own mother.
Oh, wow.
And I'm wondering if that's because they were just so overworked with having a job and doing, the job at home, which is a full-time job on its own. So that was kind of a windy question,
Yeah. Well,
but
there's a lot of good stuff in that.
yeah.
We can we could go a lot of places, with that. Julie, you started with you know, in this current culture, like kinda I heard it as what are they up against? Like what's kind of going on for them? And, you know, both like when you see like studies and, people are waiting longer to have children. People are not choosing not to have children. And some of that is because they see, they in our American culture, like moms aren't supported, like it's hard, and even when they and see, these kind of glorified things on social media and that it's like they see through it or they're like, how am I going to navigate this? Or I really like my job. How am I going to, add motherhood to this? And they're not seeing a lot of great models. So some of them are choosing not to or opting out or, um, doing it later, which I think can be great. But then it leads to what you're saying that now we're in this new thing that we have to figure out is like we hadn't really quite gotten through the old model where we are more valuable than just raising children. Like we have expansive purposes, as women here on earth. And we're the original creators and, we're so expansive, right? And so, um, but we haven't really valued the aspect of motherhood. We still in the 50s, it became a job. I don't know, when you track it back, like parenthood or parenting wasn't even a word until like the 50s. And then it became, something that we started equating to a job or school. Like, oh, your your children are a reflection of you. There's a right way to do this.
I think they
You
still
know,
are.
it
We
is.
still
It's still
they
there.
still are. Yeah.
And it still is. So now, a woman's, she's yes, she's expansive, but she's trying to put her time in. She's not feeling like she's moving like she could have in her job because she's also putting energy into raising children, and having a family. And she's now feeling like she's not doing either of them well, right?
Yeah,
Because
when you're at work, you're thinking of the kids. When you're with kids, you're thinking of what you have to get done with work. So what's the bottom line?
yeah, I
How
know.
do we navigate that?
Well, I think there's a lot of one, I think, which was what we saw in the pandemic. We need to start valuing that care, that, you know, start valuing the work, the emotional labor, the being like and seeing it as high a value as, you know, becoming a multimillionaire CEO slash entrepreneur. And, there's something I think that's gonna be one of the linchpins in the formula, Julie, is that both are valued and then, oh, the company I work for is going to value it too. And we're gonna figure out ways that this is gonna work for everybody because, mama being happy in all of her environments just uplifts all of the environments, right? So, well, maybe you don't know, but I more of us need to know that the US is the worst developed country when it comes to supporting moms, when comes to supporting parents, particularly birth and new motherhood. We have the worst statistics on mortality. I mean, Julie, we're the richest advanced country with the worst statistics for infant and new and mother mortality. Like
Why?
that
I
doesn't
didn't know that.
yeah, I know. Isn't that's one of those scary statistics that we like to hide. Um, because there's kind of this big general, like we don't value it. So resources aren't put there. I mean, it's terrible for a white woman in a, middle to upper class, but then we talk about women of color and it's, minimally that in those statistics go up like 3 to 5 to 10% depending on where they are. So we're not putting resources into the places that support. There's countries in our world that, new moms get a year off, or 60 days. It's mandated, that they get time with their newborn. And then guess what? They're in great shape to go back to work, right? Like nobody loses but we haven't been willing to go there yet. So right from the get-go, women are struggling, right? They're finding it hard to get the resources. And then even when you have the finances, it's, your company isn't very supportive. So you're, you know, to have to act like you don't have a child when you're at work, which is so inhumane.
Yeah, and when they're sick, then and you have
Oh,
to take time off and
yeah.
stay home, and that's tough too.
Well, and we're living in cultures now also, Julie, to bring up, like, we're not in a village. We don't have that built in. It's changed so much. It's so isolatory and it's so isolated. But there's that, but then we're somehow what came along with that is this belief that, like, you're supposed to do it all alone. Like, it isn't just like, "Oh gosh, I don't have all this I don't have immediate family around." Like, I personally didn't want my mom or mother-in-law, like, that wasn't gonna be healthy for me, so I got a postpartum doula, I got some support, um, but when that was just built in and natural and you'd watched other women go through it and, yeah, you were still gonna have your own experience, but there was so much more, community to it, and, women then feel like, "Oh, I shouldn't need that help, though." Somehow we've evolved, like, we really wanna bust that one,
Yeah,
really,
that's
really
one of
wanna,
those
like, bust
myths.
through that one that, you know, we deserve because sadly, like, what's been wired in is somehow so many women just don't feel like they deserve it or that it should be a natural part of it as opposed to like, "Oh, look at me, so needy, like, I need help with this thing I'm supposed to immediately know how to do and be good at," and we
And it's
do.
okay to feel like, "I have no clue."
Exactly, it's we especially if you haven't been around it or I mean, there's some natural instincts. I'm not saying that those aren't part of it, but way more so because we're so separate from just the cycles of nature. We've, gotten so far from just being in contact with the natural world, let alone, other humans in community that it's really painful.
And I
It's
don't think it just applies to childbirth too, because when women are empty nesters, if they're going through a divorce or they've lost a spouse who's passed and they're rewriting their life and what do I want to do and what's my purpose? I get that a lot. Please help me figure out
yeah,
what my purpose is and please help me know how to navigate that. I think that can be a lonely time as well.
for
It's
sure.
not just childbirth. I think it can be changing a job, moving, selling your house, whatever.
All of those big transitions and big, state changes, and some of them are natural chronologically or, kind of fall that way. Some come at us unexpectedly. It's why I really love to work with people as early as possible, creating things like a vision for themselves or, I mean, it could be a purpose statement, but particularly like a vision where it's like, you know, what are the values I want to align with? What are the bigger principles that I want to navigate my life through? Like what matters to me? And that can be anything from beauty to emotional expression to authenticity, consciousness, presence, and kind of we have the power to craft that for ourselves, based on it might not even seem possible sometimes when we put it together, right? We may seem so far from it. And I think that is at least something that we can have when either the thing hits us or, we're navigating through something. And, that you can do it anytime in life, obviously, but the earlier we do it, then we're practicing it through motherhood. I'm still staying true to certain aspects of myself, even if whether I choose to, work full time at home, mix the 2 up, whatever that is, how am I maintaining a sense of my core self? And, I know I think it softened the blow, I call it that's a little dramatic, but it's a big transition to have your children leave the house, right? And some of the things I talked about, like where my husband hadn't worked on a relationship became very clear, right? And this is you've been a kind of a process of ours over the last few years. It's kinda like, "Oh, I'm so excited to spend the rest of my life with you," and then, "Oh, like, you know, there there's things that because we were in our worlds, we're kinda doing the things, that we're getting to choose. It's like a next choice to stay together, to be together, and not just, like, stay together because it's comfortable or, like, oh, it's too scary to think about, like, getting out there in the world, but more, "Oh, we still have work we can do together." Like, this is and I do wanna do it with you, right? Like, yeah, I could probably find someone else, and that could be new and exciting, and some people make that choice, and I don't. I mean, I used to be a little, quite honestly, a little judgmental of it. Like, well, any relationship you can work on, you can make it work, and you can. It's like, no, people should have that choice. But I think, knowing that it's like having had put in front of me, and I think having meaningful work myself and something that I was moving into, I think it could have been very different had I not been developing, right at the time of this transition, I completed my doctorate. I was, just starting my new business, just writing my book. So it infused purpose in me. But it was still building on what I had worked on over the years.
Let's change let's change directions for a minute. When you wrote your book, Rewrite the Mother Code, your subtitle is From Sacrifice to Stardust. What a compelling choice of words. What are you
Did you
trying to
say the rest of
convey?
it? You wanna say the rest of
Well,
it, or are you
you say
waiting?
the rest, but that's my favorite part, From
Oh, yeah, I know.
Sacrifice to
From
Stardust.
sacrifice to stardust, a cosmic approach to motherhood. I know people like I say rewrite the mother code, people are like that, and then I say from sacrifice to stardust, a cosmic approach. They're like, "Oh, oh," like suddenly it's like,
Exactly.
and it's so interesting. I'm gonna share this story and then I'll say more about it, Julie. But I think what was so beautiful about, a journey of writing a book is you think you're right, you know what you're writing about, but then the book has its own life. If I open myself to spirit to like just be a channel for what's supposed to come through, there was a lot that I'm like, oh, I can't put this in, or I just have to be academic. I have to be this or that. It's like, can I mix all of these things together? The mystic part of me and the healer with the doctoral academic with my own experience. Like, can those all play well together? Um, we'll see. I think they do. I know my journey with it was extraordinary. Um, so, I've always had this, like, the mother code, what we're wired with from our childhood and from our culture and how it, can really limit and constrict our experience of motherhood, and there's this more expansive experience, and I hadn't really named it until the book. Like, I'd talk about it like it's more expansive. You might have a more you might allow, a more spiritual experience or just a transformative experience for yourself that's beyond what you maybe thought or imagined, when we open ourselves up and get rid of those codes. And so, first of all, I turned in my draft, and then my publisher, editor was like, "So I, this is all great, but I think the cosmic codes needs its own chapter. Like, you need a whole other chapter. Like, this is." I was like, "Oh," I had my own shyness about that. Well, and like you have this, like, and I don't just mean altered state, but I mean, these are experiences that can really, like, open a space to connect with the divine,
So what
to
is a cosmic code in your
so,
mind?
I gave examples of what I think, but I also invite people, like, this is your journey to, like, be with, but, you know, to me, these were universal truths, like a cosmic code of, you are a vessel of love. That, you know, mothering yourself is a sacred experience. We talked about this one at the beginning. Pain is a portal. That you are a mother. We said that right at the beginning, right? We introed
Whether
with
you have
that,
children or not.
whether you have children or not. Like,
Yeah.
just claim that sense and that aspect. And held by a loving mother. There's a universal mother energy that you can tap into, when you open yourself to it. And, just to know that that's possible, and to open ourselves to that. So, that's where I was kind of like, okay, I was in Iceland. This all came through. So then when it came, we had decided the title's going to be Rewrite the Mother Code, but we just weren't landing on a subtitle, right? Like it's just, what is it? What is it? And, you know, this was one of them that came up, right? And we're like, "Yep, I think this is it." And then I got really, like, scared and shy about it. It's like, "Oh, like, I might alienate readers if I, put cosmic in there." And we did a whole episode together about woo-woo, right? Um, and this was, my publisher, she's like, "Well, I'm gonna be mean Kristen for a moment." And she wasn't mean. She was just like she's like, "If you're not willing to put it cosmic on the title, then you shouldn't write a book about it." And I was like, "Mm." Like, I literally, like, started to cry. I'm like, "You're right." Like, it's just a me coming out of the closet, right? Like, me being
Yeah,
willing
scary.
to, put that out there, when, yeah, some people might reject that. Some people might see that it's like, "Oh, woo-woo book, not going there." But it's what you and I talked about. It's to me, it's affirming the feminine because I think it's just another way that culture tried to, like, demonize, that intuitiveness or anything that's I call them feminine values, right? The yin of this balance between masculine and feminine. Um, and, you know, in a culture that finds immediately as quickly as possible ways to diminish that or demean it. And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm gonna be a stand for it because call it what you want. It's beautiful, it's powerful. We all yearn and hunger for it. I mean, who could sit there and say, like, yeah, I'm not for being a vessel of love or that love thing is stupid, you know?
We all yearn for the spiritual connection is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
A
I
sense that
agree.
like just allow ourselves to like, you know, say that like we yearn for love. Like I want to be loved, that's a hunger of mine to love and be loved. And why can't we, why is that become like something you should be ashamed of or something? Like, no, I think those are just natural parts of being human, mm, you know, living a human life, but we're really spiritual beings.
So what role does intuition play in women's lives?
Yeah, I cover that in a couple places. Again, my publisher was like, "Well, we already talked about intuition, so I don't know if we should." I'm like, "No, we're going to talk about it like 10 times in the book if we need to." You know? Because I I like it because it's a word that I think hasn't quite yet gotten too bad of a rap, right? It's because I think a lot of people can relate to it. It's when we follow our gut sense, when we have an inkling of something that's like we hear a voice. I mean, I was with one today. I don't usually record in this spot, but it just kept coming up for me. It's like, you need to be in that spot. Like, why? I have to move everything. Like, what do I need to get? I'm like, it's come up enough times, I'm gonna follow it, and I may not know why, I may not know why, but I've learned to trust it, and I think that's going back to if we're just looking at, pregnancy, birth, conception, like that arena has become so medicalized or so technological that it's really hard for a woman to have a voice, and have something like, "This doesn't feel right." Well, just because it doesn't feel right, the tests show that this is what's happening. And I'm like, okay, that's what the tests show, but like my whole being is saying it's this other thing and how hard we have to fight for that, So I'm a huge advocate for doing anything that we can in our growth work and our spiritual work to practice those muscles, and that's what you do, what I love so much, like, your work is all about, you know, seeing that we all have this in us, and it's we just need to, like, open ourselves to listen to it,
Exactly.
but
Yeah,
it's
pay attention.
And it's not just this like, oh, that's a nice thing. It's sometimes it's our life that's at stake, you know? I use this example sometimes because as I said, birth and that were the worst. The hospital, is supposedly the safest place, but it's a business. There's just things we always have to take into account when we're putting ourselves there. And, someone is as well known or, star status of Serena Williams giving birth. And I don't know if you've ever heard her story about her birth story. Um, she had the baby and then she knew something was wrong. Like after she's like, like something, and I forget, I'm not going to remember the exact story, but you can Google it and, find the story. But I'll tell the important part of it is, no, I'm feeling that thing. I've had issues, you know, like this before, whether it was like a hemorrhage, a blood clot. I think it was, I'm saying that to Julie because, I have a recent history of blood clot. There's like a blood clot type history that she knows and she's feeling a sense of it. And they're like, nope, nothing's showing up. You're good. That's just what happens right after birth. This is normal. And she had to raise hell to get heard, and this is Serena Williams, right? Like we just, and that was her following, her physical, her instinct, her sense of self. And then, sadly we have to fight. So, and there's some arenas where you're not going to get listened to unless you raise a really loud voice. Um,
So what was
so
going
yes,
on with her?
exactly what she thought. There was this blood clot like type issue, and please, I'm sorry if I'm saying um, the exact medical issue that was wrong, but what she was saying she was afraid of or was feeling like was coming on was exactly what was happening. And they got to it in time, but only after her having to, really put up a stink and really have somebody say, like, I don't care what you all are saying or finding, like, you need to get me in and, do something about this and do a further test. And then they saw it and found it and saved her life. Like, that's where I'm, just bringing in a dramatic example because sometimes it is life or death, and it's like, oh, oh, sorry, like, just I'm having this inkling. I know it's probably nothing. And we can't, 'cause it's such a powerful aspect of ourselves. And this is men, women, obviously this isn't a gendered thing at all, but we're talking about this arena so much and I just want it valued. I want us heard. I want it, um, put on the same level of on the playing field of, the holy, the the medical science and everything that's proven and, the technology. Because they can play really well together, right? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
and I'm always just it isn't like, "Oh, we gotta throw that back out because that didn't work." Like, there's some beautiful aspects of it, just like we've talked about.
You've traveled all over the world. You've traveled extensively all over the world, and you've, in your travels, explored mothering traditions and rituals. Are there any that come to mind? What are your favorite, and how can we incorporate them into our modern day lives and our modern day societies?
Mm. Oh, I love you asking that, Julie. I literally recorded a podcast with someone just recently, and what it brings to mind is, and this is in a bunch of cultures, right? And they all have a name for it, which is, and I'm not remembering the beautiful cultural names for it, but basically, it's the first 40 days after you've given birth is sacred. It's held in such high regard and high esteem. The mother is completely taken care of. She's to do nothing other than be with her baby. 40 days comes up a lot, right? And I think there's also just something about how many of the cultures say 40 days, but,
What do you
there's
think
that.
that is? What's with the 40
Don't
days?
you feel like, Jesus was in the was in the
Yeah.
desert for 40 days. Like, I haven't, like, tracked it fully, but it certainly comes up in a lot of spiritual contexts, doesn't
I'm looking
it?
up what 4 means in my Bible numbers that
Okay, good.
I keep under my blotter on my
Yeah.
desk.
4,
4
40.
Oh, here we go. Things that are made. 4 in the Bible, so 4 plus 0 is 40,
Yeah.
40 is 4 plus 0, so you
Yeah.
get down to the numerology in the Bible, things that are made, material things, and matter itself, creation. North, south, east, and
Whoa.
west, the 4 seasons, it's all about creation. How perfect is that?
Oh, I just got
I
God
did
bumps, truth
too.
bumps as you
Yeah,
like
angel
as you
bumps.
call 'em.
Yeah.
Angel bumps, yes. Oh my gosh, that's so spot on. And, um, and they have beautiful names for it, and there's, some, and it's little mad at myself, I'm not remembering, like, some of the really beautiful specific that go with which culture, but, um, some of them are like the mother's feet aren't allowed to touch the ground for 40 days, like, she is resting, right? And, I don't know if she really doesn't walk, I mean, there's gotta be something good about walking, but I think even if we look at that metaphorically, like, she has helped to do everything, in that first 40 days, and this woman I was speaking to on the podcast who is like she had gotten every train like, she has supported births as a doula, as a birth planner, has this whole beautiful business all around supporting women in all aspects of birth, postpartum. And I said, "Well, what's something that, like, you encountered that you didn't expect even with all the planning and all the knowledge and know how you have?" And she said, what came up, eh, that I didn't expect was, like, I really didn't plan for I'm an entrepreneur. I started working the day my baby was born. I was back at it. And it's like I had to. And she's like, I mean, her kids aren't that old. She's like, it's something that I would have liked to have done differently. And she still doesn't even see how it was even possible. It just I but she's encouraging. So I think there's something really special about that time,
But
and
how
it's our
feasible is that to most
well, that's the
people?
problem, right? And that's why in our culture, it's not what it would have taken for her to, like, get the support she needed, as the front face of her business, as, the type of business she has, to do that. But we can't stop it like, "Well, it can't be done," right? I can't. It's gonna take us demanding, us showing like, bringing something like that back to show, like, well, we'll probably have to evidence base it, why is it, supportive, healthy for everybody? Why is this such a good thing to, give, women, moms, like, a set period of complete, like, time off and support? There's countries who give, like, every parent that has a baby, like, a welcome box that, like, the care that's available for them because they actually do value and honor it. We're so wired in our culture that's just like, "Well, it's not possible, so I gotta, like, deal with it." But what if it were? What could that change for us?
What's a tradition that you saw in your travels that everybody can implement that is free, that across the board, it, I'm hearing 40 days of rest. That's not feasible for most women. Not
Yeah,
just
we're
with
not quite
that.
there yet, but
No,
it's
and
I
not
like to put it out there as a possibility,
right.
right?
But
But what can
not
we do?
just for childbirth, but for birthing whatever. What is perhaps an emotional component that we can integrate for birthing of an empty nest if we're working birthing and navigating life after the loss of a spouse or the loss of a marriage or whatever, or starting something new, like a new company, a new I wanna write a book, I wanna paint a painting. What's something that we can implement and integrate that everybody can do that's free and it's easy and it's quick?
Free, easy, and quick. Well, Julie, you're.
tough, tough request.
And
That
then
didn't come to mind.
somewhere from another country. All right, we got it. It's there. I know, you know. I'll tell you the first thing that came to mind that I felt like is a thread that also wove through, eh, through through a lot of cultures, even though it may have looked different. I would kind of laugh because you go to a culture and they have their thing that's like the just do this and everything it will be okay kind of thing. And a lot of in India and some of those cultures, it was yoga and meditation, right? Yoga and meditation. But it turns out that like every culture I went to had some aspect like that, right? Something that allowed us to breathe, tune into ourselves, like slow down for a minute to however long you can give yourself, right? It's free. It's that. So we got the free.
It's easy.
Yeah, it is easy. It is a practice, right? So you might need to like do some things that help you remind you, that this is available.
Well,
But
prayer is a form of meditation.
exactly,
Our mutual
prayer.
friend, Perdita Finn, she's got lots of people that aren't Catholic that say the rosary because it's a meditation and you've got a tactile feeling the beads thing.
And so there it is, right? Like, so if you look and even though it would show up differently in every culture, something like prayer and whether it's just tuning into yourself to kind of settle your nervous system, then like to connect, with spirit in some way, whether, whatever your belief system is, to make, connection. I don't think I mentioned, one of the cosmic codes is that um, we're never alone, right? Because we're never really alone. Even though we want community and we want that support, we're also, in truth, never alone. And we can tune in and tap into spirit, to spirits, to the angels, like
Right.
to, guides and aspects. It and a breath can take us there, a naming an emotion that I'm having in this moment, right? Whatever it is can take us out of a fear place in our brain and bring us to, yes, our frontal lobe is our physical brain, but that's also, our seat of wisdom. Cultures, do a lot of work to like get us in touch with our, a chakra or something. It's yeah, whatever lens we wanna look at it through. Those were the things that I saw, even though they may be expressed differently and practiced differently, it was all kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And,
Just different presentation, different language perhaps that's gonna resonate with that culture. Couple more questions as we're winding down here.
sure.
Please finish the sentence, "When I was a young mother, I wish I knew, dot, dot,
Mm.
dot."
When I was a young mother, I wish I knew I wasn't supposed to know it all. Yeah, and I kinda tear up thinking about that. Like, I really wish I, wasn't still part of that, like, hamster wheel of, like, yeah, I learn new things and I do like what I know, but, I still think I'm supposed to, like, know it all, and that I could give myself a sense of a process and compassion and, mother myself in that way.
Yeah. And then when your girls have babies, you're gonna know a lot more and you're gonna be able to help them, and that's what's so wonderful about the generations if we have the opportunity to utilize that, if we have that opportunity to have a loved one who's been there and done that. And, my mom gave Jonathan his first bath in the kitchen sink. I was scared to death I was going to break him. And so, and then you get used to him, right? With that. Last question. Why do we incarnate?
Hmm, that one just came out of incarnated out of I you know, well, the first thing that came to mind, I'm just gonna say it, is we've all been each other's mother. Like, I don't know if that it doesn't answer the question yet, but it's like, to me, it's like because I feel like our soul, our beings, like we're always like eternally learning, eternally evolving. eternally experiencing. So I don't know if I believe it's like so I can come back and do it right or different or that we were punished, like I'm coming back as a I don't believe that.
I don't
Uh,
either. Yeah.
but I think part of our soul's evolution, and I like to think there's lots of ways that we're doing it, but one is to have the human experience, right? And this is one of the ways our soul like learns, develops, and goes on its journey of which I'm not going to pretend to know the expansiveness of that, but I I like to think I I can't know it because it's just so immense.
Yeah. And so I go to the place of, we'll figure it out when we get back to heaven. We're not supposed to know it all, but
No.
we'll figure it out when we get there. So
Mhm.
thank you for all of your work in helping empower women, helping women see things perhaps from a new perspective that they hadn't been exposed to or hadn't had any reason to even think about. You do it in such a beautiful, gentle way, which is your personality because you're brilliant. And I know that because you're my bud, you're my
Right.
friend. But I also really am in awe of how you take this brilliance of yours and your academic chops and distill it down into a way that's gentle and it's kind and it flows and it's readily accessible to really all women, regardless of their culture and regardless of what they've experienced in their lives, that we really have the ability to create whatever it is we're looking to create. And there's no reason for us to hold ourselves back. So thank you for all of
Well,
that.
thank you for that incredible, beautiful, uplifting reflection, right? And that's why we need each other to be to reflect, these
Right.
aspects of ourselves. So I really, really appreciate, that reflection.
You're
And
welcome. How can people learn more about you and your work?
mm, well, they can come to my website. It's probably the easiest, way is to go to www.drdr, because there you can find out about my book. You can find out about all the things I do and ways that I work with people and do the things that I love. And just as you reflected, I like to kind of not kind of, because the things we're talking about, can sometimes be like big mindset shifts. Our brain is not going to like a lot of the things, that we're talking about. So I feel like it has to kind of have a gentleness to it to like, you'll be okay. It's all good. You'll be okay. You
Tell
know?
everybody about your retreats and your workshops that you
Oh,
do on the
sure.
beach.
I would love to because I just completed one. I completed my spring equinox self-mothering retreat. And so much of what we talked about, Julie, I wanted to really like bring us together to set aside some time to practice those muscles of being, those muscles of like seeing the messages in everything, in our food, and this beautiful space, and through some practices, and we do sweat lodges, we do some activation kind of things, but all in the spirit of, yes, take time. This is all mothering yourself, and we need time aside to build some of those muscles, right? And to be affirmed that this works and it's okay. So I do them because I need them and I love them, and it's a beautiful, like you said, gentle way I work with people. And so there's that. I do that one-on-one immersively. I'll spend a day or half day with someone, just taking them on their journey, one-on-one. Because some people are, there's people, it's like, I don't like doing things in groups. It's like, okay, well, we can work alone. I do ongoing coaching. I have coaching where I can really help, people, in the mother code aspect, like write your code. Like, how do I get in touch with what I talked about, that aspect that's really me and what I want? And then, continued coaching if you want to how to live it. And, my my book, which my latest baby, I'm hoping opens, some of those doors and is a beautiful entree as well. Oh, and did I tell you? Um, also, well, you may or may not know this, but I I did my first TEDx talk.
Wow, fabulous.
Yeah, like, that's a whole other story, but that, is gonna be available in, 10 minutes to kinda tune in, to this message and have that available. I'm really excited about as well.
Wonderful. Congratulations. All right, everybody, we've given you lots to think about. So until next time, sending you much love from Sweet Home, Alabama, mwah, and from Mexico, too, where Gertrude is right now. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.